This is Heliox, where evidence meets empathy. Independent, moderated, timely, deep, gentle, clinical, global, and community conversations about things that matter. Breathe easy, we go deep and lightly surface the big ideas.
So to start us off today, I want you to just imagine two families. Let's call them Family A and Family B.
Okay, keeping it simple.
Right, keeping it simple.
Yeah.
Now, on paper, if we pull their tax returns, look at their W-2s, maybe check their zip codes, these two families are, completely identical. They bring in the exact same amount of money every single month. I mean, according to every official government metric, every poverty threshold, every census graph, they are completely 100% financially equal.
Right, they represent the exact same dot on an economic scatter plot.
Exactly. But see, there is this massive, totally invisible catch.
Oh, there's always a catch.
Always. So Family A has an entirely unpaid team of workers operating behind the scenes.
So wait, an unpaid team? Like who?
Like a phantom team that just does everything. They cook every single meal from scratch. So, Family A never needs to buy expensive prepackaged food or order takeout.
Okay, I see where this is going.
Right. And they clean the house top to bottom. They mend clothes so they don't have to be replaced. They do all the grocery shopping by carefully hunting for bargains, clipping coupons, all of that.
That takes a ton of time.
A huge amount of time. And maybe most importantly, this invisible team provides around-the-clock, reliable childcare for free.
Wow. Okay, so that's Family A. What about Family B?
Well, Family B has absolutely none of that.
Nothing.
Zero. After working a long, grueling shift at their actual paying jobs, the adults in Family B have to come home and do literally all of that cooking, cleaning, bargaining, and childcare entirely by themselves.
Often sacrificing, sleep and sanity to get it done?
Exactly. Just burning the candle at both ends. So the big question we really have to ask ourselves to kick off this deep dive is are Family A and Family B actually equal?
Well, the official United States poverty metrics would tell you yes, without hesitation.
Really? Just a flat yes?
Oh, absolutely. The math we use to govern our entire society looks at those two households and sees zero difference.
That is wild.
It is. But anyone who has actually lived through the exhausting reality of being Family B knows that the answer is a resounding no.
Yeah, of course.
I mean, the lived experience of their actual standard of living is worlds apart.
Worlds apart. And that profound disconnect, the gap between the cash we earn on paper and the actual invisible labor required to keep a household functioning and human beings alive, that is exactly what we are plunging into today.
It's such a crucial topic.
It really is. We are going to completely redefine what the words income and poverty actually mean for you today.
Because we have to step away from just looking at dollar bills, right?
Right. We're stepping away from the dollar bills and instead looking at the invisible currency of time. We're talking about the massive ghost economy of unpaid labor.
Which requires a complete paradigm shift in how we, view economics as a whole.
Totally. And to explore this, we are pulling from two incredibly rigorous sources today.
Yes, two fantastic papers.
The first is a 2026 study published in PLOS One. It examines gender and the determinants of poverty in the U.S. using some really highly detailed data from the Survey of Consumer Finances.
A very robust data set.
Super robust. And the second is a deeply comprehensive, sweeping paper from the Journal of Public Economics. And this one tracks over 50 years of what economists refer to as household production data.
Spanning all the way from 1965 to 2018.
Which is just a massive timeline. So the mission of our deep dive today is to uncover how the vanishing of this invisible work over the past 5 decades has completely masked the true nature of inequality in America.
It's been hiding in plain sight.
It really has. We're going to dig into the math to see why the classic traditional advice of, just get a job, mathematically does not work the same for everyone.
It really doesn't.
Reviewing these sources, it fundamentally changed how I look at a paycheck.
Yeah.
I realized I was only looking at half the ledger.
Yeah, we've basically been operating with an accounting system that treats a massive foundational sector of the economy as if it simply does not exist.
Like a total blind spot.
Exactly. We evaluate people's well-being by measuring their wallets, but we have completely ignored their clocks.
I love that phrasing, measuring wallets but ignoring clocks. So to really grasp modern inequality, we first have to figure out how to measure this invisible economy.
Right. Because it isn't taxed.
Nah.
It isn't tracked on a pay stub.
Nope.
And it definitely doesn't show up in our gross domestic product.
Right. And the Journal of Public Economics paper calls this household production. Let's establish the boundaries of that term for the listener. What actually counts?
So household production is fundamentally unpaid work that you do for your own household, which you could theoretically hire someone else to do.
Okay, so there's a specific test for this.
Yes, economists use a very specific boundary to define this, which they call the third-person criterion.
The third-person criterion.
Okay.
Meaning, if I can pay a third person to do a task for me,
Yeah.
and the end result is basically the same, it counts as household production.
That is exactly the dividing line. Think about your daily routine. Cooking dinner, doing the laundry, mowing the lawn.
Mowing the lawn counts.
It does. And actively caring for children, playing with them, helping them with homework, giving them medicine.
Right, because I could technically hire someone for all of those.
Precisely. You could hire a personal chef, a domestic cleaner, a landscaper, or a nanny to do those tasks for you. Because you can outsource them, they are considered productive labor. You are producing a service for your household.
Okay, that makes sense. But what about something like sleeping or going to the gym?
That wouldn't count.
Because I can't hire someone to sleep for me and wake up feeling rested myself.
Exactly. Or watching a movie or eating a meal. You cannot pay someone to enjoy a vacation on your behalf.
I mean, I wish I could sometimes, but no.
Right. Those activities are categorized strictly as personal care or leisure. Household production is strictly the work required to maintain the baseline functioning of the home and its members.
Okay, so this brings us to a concept the researchers introduce called extended income, which I just thought was a brilliant way to frame this whole thing.
It's a game changer for economic modeling.
It really is.
Right.
So we all know our market income. That's the cash from our jobs, investments, government benefits, whatever.
The standard stuff.
Right. But extended income is your market income plus the imputed value of all that unpaid household work.
It essentially treats the time you spend doing laundry as a form of non-cash income.
Right, which sounds crazy at first, but how do they actually make that calculation work?
Yeah.
Like the economists have to figure out how to assign a fair dollar value to that unpaid time, right?
They do.
If you spend an hour scrubbing your floors, how much income did you just generate for yourself?
So the methodology they use is based on what's called replacement cost.
Replacement cost, okay.
They look at the prevailing wages of general domestic workers.
Like a housekeeper.
Exactly, essentially a housekeeper wage. They ask, what would it cost you in the open market to hire someone to come into your home and perform these specific maintenance tasks?
Okay, I follow.
They take the hours of unpaid work a family does, multiply it by that housekeeper wage, and then they just add that dollar amount to the family's regular market income.
Which creates a much, much more accurate picture of a family's true standard of living.
It does, because think about it. If you aren't doing the laundry yourself and you still want clean clothes to wear to work, you have to pay someone to wash them or buy new ones.
You're paying for it either way, either with your time or your cash.
Right. The labor has intrinsic economic value, even if no cash changes hands.
Okay, so to track this, the researchers look at this massive data set called the American Heritage Time Use Study. And these aren't just like vague surveys where people guess how much they cleaned at the end of the year, right?
Oh, they are incredibly detailed time diaries.
Time diaries.
Yes, they are exhaustive. Thousands of individuals over the decades have recorded their activities minute by minute throughout the entire day.
Minute by minute. That sounds exhausting just to fill out.
It is a lot of work for the participants, but it gives us incredible data. The researchers analyzed this time diary data spanning from 1965 all the way to 2018 to see how the ghost economy has actually changed.
And they found a seismic shift, right? I mean, a massive change in how Americans allocate their time.
Huge.
Let's look at the numbers for women first because, well, the shift here is staggering. Between 1965 and 2018, women's unpaid work plummeted by 35%.
That's a massive drop.
It really is.
Yeah.
In 1965, women were doing an average of 37 hours a week of unpaid household labor.
37 hours a week. Think about that. That is essentially a second full-time job.
A full-time job that pays $0, accrues literally no retirement benefits, and offers absolutely no weekends off.
It was a massive invisible subsidy keeping American households afloat.
Subsidy is the perfect word for it. But by 2018, that number had dropped to 24 hours a week.
Right. That is a massive reduction in household production.
And the data shows it was driven primarily by a steep decline in just general housework, right?
Yes, primarily housework. People are spending significantly less time cooking elaborate meals from scratch, doing extensive deep cleaning, and managing laundry the way they did in the 1960s.
We have dishwashers, washing machines, microwaves.
Technology definitely played a role, along with changing cultural standards. Now, over that same 50-year period, men's unpaid work did increase, reflecting those shifting cultural norms.
Okay, but let's be real. The increase in men's unpaid labor doesn't come close to filling the void left by that 13-hour drop in women's labor, does it?
No, it really doesn't. Men's unpaid work rose from 12 hours a week in 1965 to 15 hours a week in 2018.
Okay, let me do the math. So women dropped by 13 hours, and men only increased by 3 hours.
Right. So when you combine those figures, the aggregate result is that as an entire society, we are performing vastly less unpaid household production than we used to.
The ghost economy of the home has fundamentally shrunk.
It has.
But there is a really fascinating quirk in the data when we look at where that remaining time is actually being spent. Because while time spent scrubbing floors and, cooking stews for 4 hours plummeted, time spent on active childcare stayed roughly constant.
Which is super interesting.
Right. And on the surface, that sounds normal until you remember the demographics. Families in 2018 had significantly fewer children than families in 1965.
Exactly. The average number of children per household actually dropped by half over that period.
Wow, by half.
But the total aggregate hours spent on active childcare did not drop.
So what does that actually mean?
The implication of that math is profound. It means parents today are spending significantly more active, hands-on time per child than parents did in the 1960s.
Okay, so we've basically traded scrubbing the baseboards for helping with algebra and driving to soccer practice.
Yes, exactly. The nature of the unpaid labor has shifted from material maintenance of the house to the active development of the children.
But the overall volume of time spent in the home has still dropped dramatically.
Yes, the total hours are still way down.
Okay, so let's connect this massive shift in time back to the money. Let's look at the trajectory of extended income over that 50-year span. Because the story we always hear, like on the news or whatever, is that the economy has grown.
Right, that GDP is always going up.
Yeah. Market incomes, the actual cash people take home from their jobs, rose significantly between 1965 and 2018. And this was heavily driven by the massive entry of women into the paid workforce.
Right, creating the modern dual-earner household.
Exactly. So the cash side of the ledger looks very positive.
It does. Average market income increased by about 69% in real terms over that period.
69%. That's a big jump.
It is. But the Journal of Public Economics paper reveals the illusion hiding in that number.
And this is the core of it.
When you look at extended income, remember, the cash plus the imputed value of the household production, it only rose by 40%.
Okay, wait. I was trying to wrap my head around how a family could feel more strapped for cash today, despite literally making more money, and this paper finally made it click for me.
How so?
It is like we sold our cars to buy gas.
Oh, I like that.
Right. We look richer on paper because we have more cash from working more hours in the market. We have the gas money. But we lost a massive invisible asset to get that cash the time we used to spend keeping our lives running, the car. We traded unpaid time for paid time. Yeah.
Selling the car to buy gas is an incredibly apt way to visualize this, because the researchers point out that the rise in market income almost certainly overstates the actual improvements in our material living standard.
We're tricked by our bank accounts.
We are. We look at our rising bank balances and think, wow, we are 69% better off. But we have completely ignored the fact that the ghost economy of the home, the free labor that cooked our food and cleaned our clothes, shrank by 25%.
So just think about your own life for a second if you're listening to this. Think about your schedule last week. If you had to pull out your wallet and pay the market rate for a private chef for every single meal you threw together.
That would be expensive.
Oh, incredibly. And a tutor for every hour you helped your kids with their homework. And a cleaner for every time you wiped down the kitchen. And a private driver for every time you carpooled to school.
It adds up fast.
So fast. How much richer or poorer would you feel at the end of the month if you had to pay cash for all of that? But our official poverty metrics say all of that immense effort is worth exactly $0.
And that failure to accurately measure the value of time leads us to the most critical finding in the Journal of Public Economics paper.
The inequality gap.
Yes. We've established that the society-wide pool of unpaid time has shrunk. But we have to look at how that missing time actually impacts the distribution of wealth.
Right. Who is feeling the pinch the most?
What does the vanishing of the ghost economy do to the gap between the rich and the poor?
And this is where the narrative shifts, for me at least, from an interesting observation about time management into a story about a massive structural economic crisis.
It really is a crisis.
Because historically, unpaid household work acted as a massive equalizer. It was an invisible buffer against poverty.
And the reason is simple, right? No matter how rich or poor you are, no matter what zip code you live in, everyone has exactly 24 hours in a day.
Time is the ultimate egalitarian resource. You can't hoard more hours in the day.
Exactly. And the time diary data shows that historically, lower income households did roughly similar amounts of unpaid work as higher income households.
Right. The hours spent cooking or cleaning didn't vary wildly across the income spectrum in the way that, say, stock portfolios, real estate holdings, or salaries do.
They were relatively flat across the board.
So let's look at the concrete numbers from 1965 to see this buffer in action, because this blew my mind. For the poorest 10% of the country in 1965, the value of their household production made up a staggering 56% of their total extended income.
Over half.
More than half. More than half of their true economic value, their actual standard of living, was generated purely by their own unpaid time.
But for the richest 10% of the country in 1965,
Right, what was their number?
household production only made up 21% of their extended income.
That is a huge difference, 56% versus 21%.
And the math dictates that outcome. Because the wealthiest households had so much more market cash, right? So the fixed amount of unpaid work they did represented a much smaller slice of their overall economic pie.
Right, a drop in the bucket compared to their salaries.
But for the poorest households, that unpaid work was the anchor of their survival. It was the buffer that kept them fed and clothed when the cash ran out.
But as we just discussed, the amount of time people spent on household production fell dramatically over the next 50 years across the board. Everyone lost time.
Everyone lost time. But if you remove a buffer that makes up 56% of someone's livelihood, the devastation is going to be wildly disproportionate.
Oh, absolutely. The poorest households were hit the absolute hardest by the time crunch of the modern economy.
To measure the severity of this, the economists look at the gap between the top 10% and the bottom 10% over time.
Okay.
If we only look at market income, just the cash from jobs and investments, the inequality gap between the rich and the poor rose steadily between 1965 and 2018.
Which aligns with the standard economic narrative we all hear, right? Income inequality is rising.
Exactly. But the standard narrative is incomplete. It's only telling half the story.
This is where it gets crazy.
The researchers found that when you look at extended income, the cash plus the value of time, the inequality gap didn't just rise, it exploded.
Exploded.
If cash inequality grew by a certain amount, the true inequality when factoring in the loss of that vital time buffer grew nearly twice as fast.
So those standard economic graphs we see on the news, the ones showing the poorest half of the country maybe getting a little bit more money over time and slowly improving their lot, those graphs are basically presenting a deeply skewed reality.
They are.
They are measuring the wallets, but they are ignoring the clocks.
The researchers state plainly that market measures dramatically overstate improvements for households at the bottom of the income distribution.
Overstate improvements, meaning things look better than they actually are.
Yes. For the bottom 10% of households, their market cash income went up by about 29% since 1965.
Okay, so that sounds good.
It does, but when you factor in the massive loss of their household production time, their actual extended income, their true standard of living, actually declined slightly.
Declined. Wait, they are literally poorer in real terms of living standards than they were 50 years ago, despite having a little more cash in their pockets.
Yes, because that extra cash isn't nearly enough to buy the services required to replace the time they lost.
Okay, let's paint a picture of this. Imagine a low-income mother in the 1960s who didn't work in the market, but she spent all day cooking cheap staples from scratch, mending clothes, and watching her children.
A huge amount of household production.
Massive. Now imagine a low-income mother today who enters the workforce to get that 29% increase in cash.
Okay.
She immediately loses the time she used to spend generating that free household value. She has to buy convenience food because she's exhausted after her shift. She has to pay for a babysitter or daycare. And she has to buy replacement clothes instead of mending them because who has time to sew?
Right.
Suddenly, that extra cash is entirely eaten up by the invisible tax of replacing her own household production.
And the wealthy can afford to outsource all of this without feeling the pinch. They just buy the time of others.
But the poor simply cannot.
They can't. And the paper even stress tests this conclusion to ensure the math is absolutely airtight.
I love when they do this. How do they test it?
Well, the researchers anticipated the critique. What if our valuation of time is wrong? What if using a housekeeper wage is undervaluing the work?
Right, because childcare is way more expensive than general housekeeping.
Exactly. So they ran all the numbers again, but this time arbitrarily valuing every single hour of unpaid work at double the housekeeper wage.
Just to see what would happen.
Right. They also tried valuing it using local state minimum wages.
Right.
They even tried valuing it at the specific individual's opportunity cost, meaning they calculated what that specific person could have earned in their actual day job if they had been working instead of cleaning.
Okay, so they really threw the kitchen sink at this model. Did any of those alternate models shrink the inequality gap?
None of them did.
None.
Zero. Across every single alternative model, the core finding remained identical. The equalizing buffer of unpaid work has severely eroded.
Wow.
Inequality in extended income grew much faster than inequality in market income, no matter how you value the time.
So the loss of time at the bottom of the economic ladder is a structural crisis that our official poverty metrics are completely blind to.
They simply do not see it.
This brings us to a really stark realization. If we ask who lost the most in this 50-year time crunch, who suffered the absolute worst economic consequences when that free time vanished, the answer is painfully clear.
It's single parents.
It is single parents. The data from the Journal of Public Economics is unambiguous on this point. Single parents saw the largest drop in the value of their household production time, a 22% drop.
Which is devastating.
And as a direct result, they experienced the smallest increase in extended income compared to married couples or childless adults.
And it makes total logistical sense, right?
Yeah, think about it. If you are a single parent, you do not have a partner to share the 24 hours with. The clock is entirely on your shoulders.
You're doing the work of two people in the exact same amount of time.
Exactly. If you have to work more hours in the market just to afford skyrocketing housing and food costs, every single hour you spend at work is an hour stolen directly from your household production. There is literally no one else at home to pick up the slack.
And this perfectly segues into our second source, the 2026 PLOS-1 study. Because this study gives us a brutally clear present-day picture of what poverty actually looks like right now, specifically for single-headed households.
Right. Let's look at the current reality.
The researcher, Patty J. Fisher, utilized data from the 2022 Survey of Consumer Finances.
The SCF.
Yes, the SCF. This is a massive, nationally representative data set conducted by the Federal Reserve Board. It provides one of the most detailed looks at the financial lives of Americans.
And the baseline reality check from that 2022 data is just sobering. There are 37.9 million people living below the official U.S. poverty threshold.
37.9 million.
But when you zoom in on single-headed households living in poverty, a massive, undeniable gender divide appears.
The demographic split is really alarming.
Break it down for us.
Okay, so when looking at single-headed households living below the poverty line, 38.3% of the female-headed households have dependent children living with them.
38.3%.
Compare that to male-headed households in poverty, where only 12.7% have dependent children.
Okay, let that sink in. A single mother in poverty is roughly 3 times more likely to be responsible for a dependent child than a single father in the exact same income bracket.
3 times more likely.
She is 3 times more likely to be dragging a toddler to the grocery store. 3 times more likely to be paying for daycare out of a minimum wage paycheck, and 3 times more likely to be losing sleep to care for a sick kid while trying to balance a poverty-level budget.
The time deficit we just talked about is concentrated heavily on women.
Extremely heavily. And the disparity goes beyond just the presence of children, doesn't it?
It does. Female-headed households in poverty also have significantly lower average net worth.
Okay, so not just income, but actual accumulated wealth.
Right. The study found their average net worth was around $250,000 compared to nearly $489,000 for male-headed households.
Wait, I feel like we need to clarify that because someone might hear those numbers and think $250,000. It doesn't sound like poverty.
Oh, that's a very important distinction to make.
Right. This is a great reminder that poverty metrics measure cash flow, not necessarily illiquid assets.
Exactly. A person can have very low cash flow, meaning their income drops below the poverty line because, say, they lost a job or went on fixed disability. but they might still own a home they bought 30 years ago, which is appreciated in value, creating a higher net worth on paper.
Right. They can't eat the drywall, but the house is worth money.
Precisely. But what the data highlights is the disparity in that safety net. Even among those experiencing poverty-level cash income, the men have nearly double the wealth cushion to fall back on compared to the women.
Double the cushion. And the study also notes that these women report much higher rates of poor health and income uncertainty, right?
Yes. It creates a compounding cycle of disadvantage. They have less cash, fewer assets to borrow against, worse health, and 3 times the likelihood of having another human being entirely dependent on them for survival.
It's just a perfect storm. So to truly understand why this massive gender gap in poverty exists, the author of the PLOS-1 study used the statistical technique called logistic regression with decomposition methods, specifically following a framework developed by Jackson and Lindley.
Which is getting into the heavy math.
It is, but I want to spend some time on this because understanding this math is literally the key to understanding why so many of our poverty solutions just fail completely.
The decomposition method is an incredibly powerful analytical tool. Essentially, it allows researchers to separate the complex causes of poverty into different buckets to see what is actually driving the disparity between men and women.
Right. It separates the variables.
Yes, it tests for 2 distinct things, the constant effect and the coefficient effect.
Okay, let's use an analogy to break this down because coefficient effect is a mouthful.
Go for it.
Imagine you have 2 different people baking a cake in the exact same kitchen.
Okay, baking a cake.
The constant effect asks, is the oven just inherently biased against one of the bakers?
Biased oven, got it.
Right. Holding everything else completely equal, they use the exact same flour, the exact same sugar, the exact same recipe. Does simply being baker, the cake is statistically more likely to burn.
So in economic terms, holding education, job status, and health equal, does simply being a woman increase your statistical likelihood of being in poverty?
Yes. Is there a constant penalty just for your gender?
That is exactly what the constant effect measures.
Okay, and the other one?
The coefficient effect, also known as the response effect, asks a different question. It's about the ingredients themselves.
Okay.
It asks, do life circumstances respond differently to the same economic heat based on gender?
The ingredients respond differently to the heat.
Right. For example, does having a high school diploma protect a man from poverty differently than it protects a woman? Does working a full-time job have a different impact on a man's poverty risk compared to a woman's?
Okay, that makes perfect sense. So the researchers run this massive data set through the decomposition model. What does the math actually show about the oven and the ingredients?
The analysis found absolutely no significant constant effect.
Really? None?
The variable for simply being female was not statistically significant on its own, meaning there is no evidence of a baseline gender penalty in poverty beyond the factors adjusted for in the model.
Okay, so it means women are not poor because of some mystical gender aura that just repels wealth. The oven isn't biased.
The oven is fine. But the model found a massive statistically significant coefficient effect.
The ingredients.
The way life circumstances interact with the economy is fundamentally different for women than for men.
The ingredients react differently to the heat.
Precisely.
Women are poorer because they are the ones carrying the physical, temporal, and financial weight of the children, the poor health, and the lack of wealth cushions. Their life circumstances respond differently to the economy because their life circumstances are fundamentally different.
And the researchers state this explicitly. The gender differences in poverty are explained by differential characteristics, not gender discrimination alone. It is the wildly unequal distribution of life's burdens.
Which leads us directly to perhaps the most frustrating finding in the entire study, which is what we might call the employment paradox.
The employment paradox. It's a tough one to swallow.
It is. Why the classic advice to just get a job fails. Because if poverty is driven by these life circumstances, if it's driven by a lack of time and a surplus of dependence, what happens when we apply the traditional American solution to poverty?
Hard work.
Right, our whole modern welfare system is built on the idea that employment is the ultimate cure for poverty.
Get a job. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps.
And on a surface level, the data from the PLOS-1 study supports that narrative.
Oh, it does?
Yes. The survey data reveals that working for an employer, being self-employed, having a high school diploma, and being older all significantly lower the risk of poverty for both men and women. Employment is undeniably a protective factor.
Okay, but when we look closer at that coefficient effect we just talked about, the researchers discovered a really highly consequential trend. They found that working for an employer has a smaller protective effect against poverty for women than it does for men.
But wait, I have to push back on this because this is where the traditional logic just breaks down for me.
Okay, push back.
A minimum wage paycheck of, say, $15 an hour pays the exact same dollar amount to a man as it does to a woman. A dollar is a dollar.
True.
How can having a job protect a man from poverty but leave a woman struggling to stay afloat? The math of a paycheck doesn't change based on who cashes it at the bank.
The math of the paycheck doesn't change, but the math of the household does. This is where we have to connect the dots back to the invisible economy of time from the first study.
The time crunch.
Yes. The 26 percentage point difference in who is raising the kids is the anchor pulling the math down. Remember, 38% of the single women in poverty have kids versus only 12% of the men.
The household production buffer, or rather, the lack of it.
Precisely. Think about the logistics. If a single man gets a job making $15 an hour, he keeps his earnings. His extended income goes up.
He might have less time to watch TV or sleep, but his material living standard improves.
Right. The job acts as a strong protective shield against poverty. But if a single mother gets that exact same job making $15 an hour, she immediately has to purchase the household production she can no longer stay home to do.
Specifically, she has to purchase childcare.
She has to pay someone else to watch the toddler she used to watch for free.
And childcare in this country is outrageously expensive. So let's say she earns $15 an hour, but she has to pay a daycare center or a babysitter $12 an hour.
Her net gain is $3 an hour.
$3. The job provides a smaller protective effect because the invisible tax of replacing her own household production literally eats the wages.
The job eats its own wages, and it goes even deeper than just the hourly cost of a babysitter.
How so?
The PLOS-1 study highlights that the lack of reliable, accessible childcare causes constant career interruptions, lost shifts, and limited flexibility.
Oh, because kids get sick.
All the time. If the babysitter cancels, or the child gets a fever and can't go to daycare, the mother has to call out of work. If she calls out too many times, she loses the job, or at the very least, loses the wages for that day.
Think about the last time you had an unexpected emergency, like a dependent was sick, or an elderly parent needed immediate help.
It's stressful for anyone.
Right. Think about the absolute panic of trying to find a last-minute babysitter so you don't miss a mandatory meeting at work. Now imagine dealing with that exact same panic while living on the absolute brink of deep poverty, knowing that missing this one single shift means you literally cannot pay the electric bill.
It is an impossible calculus. The job does not cure poverty if the infrastructure to support the worker does not exist.
It's a bridge to nowhere.
And the researchers point out that U.S. safety nets have increasingly shifted away from direct cash-based programs like TNF, temporary assistance for needy families, and moved toward in-kind benefits like SNAP food stamps and Medicaid, often tying these vital benefits to strict work requirements.
So the policy is essentially, you have to prove you are working in the market to get the help.
Yes.
But they don't provide the childcare to let them work.
Exactly.
Right.
The researchers argue that providing policies that increase work requirements without simultaneously addressing the childcare barriers is mathematically destined to fail the people who need it most.
Mathematically destined to fail. That is a heavy conclusion.
They conclude that gender-neutral poverty reduction strategies, like simply saying, we need to create more jobs, are insufficient. The authors argue we need targeted interventions, specifically affordable childcare support, to actually allow low-income women to participate in the labor market without being financially penalized by the loss of their own household production.
Because if we don't provide that infrastructure, we're basically just telling them to run up a down escalator.
That's a great way to put it.
The 26 percentage point difference in who has the kids is a fundamental structural difference in how time is distributed. You cannot fix a structural time deficit with a minimum wage job that ignores the cost of time.
And that brings us to the core synthesis of everything we've looked at today.
All right, let's pull it all together.
The official U.S. poverty line, the actual dollar amount the government uses to decide who is poor and who gets help, was originally designed and calculated in the 1960s.
And what was the 1960s? It was an era when there was a massive, unprecedented surplus of unpaid female labor.
37 hours a week.
37 hours a week of cooking, cleaning, and caring per woman, acting as a massive invisible subsidy to the American economy. The poverty line was calculated in a world where it was assumed someone was at home, working for free, stretching every single dollar by cooking from scratch and providing free daycare.
But that world is gone. Women's unpaid work plummeted by 35%.
The ghost economy shrank.
The equalizing buffer of household production has vanished, hitting the poorest families, and especially single mothers, the hardest. By ignoring extended income, by failing to value time, our economic measurements have become completely blind to the actual lived reality of poverty.
We measure their wallets, but we ignore their clocks. We tell single parents to just get a job while completely ignoring the invisible, crushing cost of the household production they are forced to abandon to take that job.
The researchers make a very compelling case that this is a profound failure of economic measurement. And as the data shows, it has allowed inequality in actual living standards to explode far beyond what the official income graphs tell us.
Which leaves me with a final lingering thought for you to mull over long after this deep dive ends. If our entire measure of economic success, of GDP, of poverty in this country is built on an accounting system that treats the most essential work of human survival, raising children, caring for the sick, keeping a home as having a monetary value of exactly zero, is our economy actually broken, or is it working exactly as it was measured to work?
It raises a fundamental question about what we choose to value as a society, because what we choose to measure ultimately dictates what we choose to protect.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the math, keep looking for the invisible forces shaping your world, and we will see you next time. Heliox is produced by Michelle Brucker and Scott Bleakley. It features reviews of emerging research and ideas from leading thinkers, curated under their creative direction with AI assistance for voice, imagery, and composition. Systemic voices and illustrative images of people are representative tools, not depictions of specific individuals. Thanks for listening today. 4 recurring narratives underlie every episode: boundary dissolution, adaptive complexity, embodied knowledge, and quantum-like uncertainty. These aren't just philosophical musings, but frameworks for understanding our modern world. We hope you continue exploring our other episodes, responding to the content, and checking out our related articles at helioxpodcast.substack.com.